I'm John. I'm head of product at a company called Decoded. Slightly different perspective from the other speakers. We are a company that design learning experiences. That's all we do. We design and sell learning experiences. We mainly work with the business world, but other organisations like charities. We've done a bit of work with government as well. We've got offices in London, New York, Sydney, and Amsterdam, and from there we try and reach most of the world. I'm also under no illusion. It's interesting kind of seeing some of the limitations of like in-person workshops. It's really interesting to think about that, because I think what we do isn't some sort of magic solution to turning someone into a learning organisation. I don't think that's what we do at all. However, I think we're often brought in because people are at the beginning of the journey and need to understand something more about topics that we cover: code, data science, cybersecurity, design thinking, service design, artificial intelligence, whatever, something in that technology space. Interesting. Okay, but before we go there, I've been doing, every Tuesday I've been doing a philosophy class at the moment, in morality and applied ethics, and I think there's a slight poverty of philosophy in the world at the moment. And when we think about education, I like the idea of going back to what people used to think about education. So in ancient Athens, there were various different philosophy schools started up. Plato's Academy was one famous one, which had as its slogan, "Let no one ignorant of geometry enter." That's the thing. And I kind of like the sound more of this particular school. This is Epicurus's school, and he called it the Epicurus's garden. It was a garden of learning. So you can see philosophers sitting around. It was the first of those ancient schools to admit women as the rule rather than the exception. Had lots of other kind of forward-thinking ideas. And its motto was, "Stranger, here you will do well to tarry. Here our highest good is pleasure." And Epicurus kind of gets credited with creating hedonism, but these people weren't sitting around kind of drinking wine and having a nice time partying around. Actually, the kind of pleasure came from a philosophical understanding of the world. So actually, how do we deal with the biggest fears in our lives, be it death probably being the biggest fear, but then maybe destitution or heartbreak? How do we deal with those huge problems? So I don't know anyone here whose learning and development department has got this as their motto. Anyone? No? Probably not. And maybe more's the pity. So I guess from my point of view, we have actually worked with one client who I feel like this could have been their motto. They brought in Decoded, and we're there to sort of teach people about coding and data science and innovation. And we were desperate for them. Please tell us why you're teaching these people what you're teaching, what we're teaching them specifically. How is this contributing to the business moving forward? And they wouldn't move on it. They said, this is all about staff engagement. We want people to work in an environment where they feel like they can learn, they can pursue any topic that they're interested in, and they're being supported in that journey. However, most of the time, this is in our experience, for business, learning at scale usually means digital transformation is afoot. And I kind of like to put those in quotation marks. It's been used once already. I think it can sound great, and again, this is obviously an organisation we're sitting in today who has these amazing posters around and really embodies digital transformation. Of course, that's a good thing. It's brilliant that we're doing digital transformation. But I don't think it feels like that for everyone. It's a big part of what we do at Decoded. So I think for us, where we try to come in is around the mindset rather than the skill set. So we're typically working with fairly traditional organisations where people see stuff like design thinking, platform thinking, APIs, AI, neural networks, blockchain, cybersecurity, and they don't get excited, they feel fearful. So at one workshop I was running, I remember we'd go around at the beginning, speaking to people and say, how much do you know, how do you feel about the topic of, say, coding? And you kind of go around, people are always sort of saying things like, well, I'm one question away from disaster in any meeting that I go to, generally, when I'm talking about things like APIs. And one person said, I'm actually, to be honest, I'm kind of waiting it out till retirement. I've got about another 5 years, kind of hoping that my job won't be made redundant in that time period, and then that's the end. And at the end of the course, that gentleman came up to me and said, that was brilliant. Like, what you've given me is an extra 5 years of my career. I'm excited to get involved. I'm excited by digital transformation, all this stuff that's been talked about at work. I'm actually excited by this and I want to get involved. So for us, we generally try and condense learning to a small amount of time. In person, we cover things like code, so showing people the mindset of a developer. Really simple things, what does that mindset actually look like? So We've got make things open, it makes things better. That sounds very nice. What does open mean? And what, this has sort of roots in kind of open source culture. What does that culture actually look like? Why is it beneficial for developers to think in that way and technical people to think in that way? I love the sort of moment where someone asks me, well, they're kind of trying to code away, like, how do you do this? How do you make a rounded corner in CSS? And my answer is usually, I don't know. Like, I'm a professional developer, supposedly. But Google it. And actually, that step for me is almost one of the biggest, it sounds like a stupid thing, teaching people how to Google. But actually, when we're teaching our innovation course, we show people how to prototype, how to build landing pages, how to build paper prototypes, how to build interactive wireframes. What's the best tool for building an interactive wireframe? I don't know, there's probably a new one that was released today. So I think it's much, much more about, rather than teaching people specific software, specific skills, generally this sort of mindset of how do I solve a problem as a developer would, as a service designer would, as a data scientist would. How would a hacker approach this issue? So we're kind of very interested in that side of things, and we're, again, we mainly do in-person stuff. We've probably taught about 100,000 people in terms of face-to-face through a variety of organizations. We're also doing, we have done lots of work in the online learning space, generally about how we, I guess it's been different for every client. Typically people have got their own LMS, and it's about how do we serve up our content in a way that makes sense for that organization. And I think as we've gradually gone from teaching smaller pockets within organizations to doing these bigger programs, we've learned we need a different approach. So this one, can a traditional bank disrupt fintech? What do you think? Maybe, I don't know. I don't know if that's exciting. What do you think? You're from Lloyd, so you're leaving because it can't. I don't know. But anyway, so this is the type of learning question, I suppose, that our clients come to us with. So this particular one was ING. So we taught 3,500 people so far at ING directly. So a Decoded facilitator has been there in person. We've also set up Train the Trainer, so I'm really interested to chat to you about how your Train the Trainers program is working, maybe share some ideas there. So we've also embedded Train the Trainer in Turkey and a few other, Poland as well, different markets, set that up. But I think the amazing thing with ING, where suddenly we found our workshops landing far better than they would typically, was that the bank was actually changing. So I really think that learners need to have skin in the game. There's no point sending someone on a design thinking workshop or a coding workshop or a data science workshop if they go back to the same job. It's just, you don't get the same effect. So what ING were doing as part of this digital transformation was they were restructuring. I think they ended up having to fire about half of their senior leaders. They were embedding the Spotify tribe, squads, guilds, organizational structure, or trying to. They were investing in lots of fintech. They were funding external startups, and they were creating internal accelerators. And so, for me, we were just one kind of small little piece of the puzzle. We worked with the senior leadership team, so they needed a sense of like, why is this changing? High level, what is going on? What does the type of culture where post-it notes are appearing on walls actually mean? Why does that actually happen? We worked with the practitioners who were going into accelerators. So if people come across accelerators before, this idea of creating small teams that work like mini startups within the organization on a specific brief. I read an article recently that described accelerators as innovation theatre. You're not actually innovating, you're kind of putting on a show of innovating. That may be so, but I think accelerators do provide a bit of skin in the game. So actually the people who go into accelerators, you give them maybe some training at the beginning, but what they learn through the process of trying to work in that way can be far more valuable. We've often found that typically is a great way of throwing up the obstacles that might exist within an organisation that stop people working in that way day to day. Usually some sort of grandiose IT policy that stops you actually putting anything live. So that's ING. Another example I think that I like is kind of where I think digital transformation is moving. And again, interesting to see the data science accelerator? No, academy. Accelerator that you're talking about is this shift to an idea of can every employee make data-informed decisions. So we're working with lots of organizations in this space. We're part of that 96 hours, 96 at IBM. So we're working with IBM on their new joiners and their managers. But generally we're seeing this shift in how can we make every employee able to make data-informed decisions. Airbnb published a really amazing series of blogs that I recommend everyone check out, in which they showed this Venn diagram where they said, actually, data education will help drive data-informed decision-making, but I think the crucial word there is help. So there's a huge education program. They rolled this out for an eighth of their staff, so Then think about your own organisations. What does an eighth of your organisation look like if an eighth of those people went through some sort of data education? But it won't work unless people have got the right tools and access. And I think as we move into this space, it becomes even harder. If IT are closing down systems and things are not available, then you send people on a workshop and they leave pretty much hopeless. Like, it was in the worst place. I think, Craig, you were saying that people leave. They go on a training course, they see what's possible, they go back to their desk job, they're not allowed to install Python, and then they leave the company and work for a small time. So I think for me that's so important, and I don't know, like whenever we go into an organisation now, we don't just roll out some training. We really need to understand, like, are people able to apply this the next day? So again, I'm going to do another slightly shameless plug. Michelle is from Decoded. Michelle is organising the Decoded hackathon, where we are working on online learning. So we have a belief that online learning can, in terms of user experience, be better than a kind of online PowerPoint with a multiple choice quiz bolted onto the end. So we've done experiments in the past with building cybersecurity chatbots and browser plugins that kind of bring learning into the browser. So if anyone wants to come along to that and actually build some stuff with us, that would be really cool. We'd love to engage with this community more.
When is it?
Pardon?
When is it?
When is it? It's on the
28th of July on Saturday.
Yeah. I was trying to keep down the number of words per slide. That was a really bad way of doing it. And please, if you're interested in doing any sort of mentoring, facilitating, training, working with Decoded, full-time or freelance, please just send me an email, john@decoded.com. We're kind of scaling up. At the moment, we're also offering an 18-month data analyst program that's fully funded by the apprenticeship levy. So you can send anyone from your organisation for free on 18 months of data training if you're paying the apprenticeship levy. And my question is this. What would happen if your organisation doubled down on learning? And you can interpret that however you like. Maybe that's IBM going from 96 to 192 hours of training. Maybe it's a doubling of budget. Maybe it's actually putting in place a proper strategy. I asked someone that Decoded this question before I came, and they said it would be a disaster. Why? Because we already do enough learning. Actually, we've got this culture embedded enough that doing any more would just mean people were learning for the sake of learning rather than actually learning things they can apply. So I'd love to hear any answers you had around this, positive, negative, what would happen. Yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you.